Hello all, I'm going to try this again. It didn't work the last time I did it because the audio and the visual became unsynced. This is supposed to be an on-live stream. I put together a video on a hobby channel last year, which took a lot of effort, which I will do at some point, but being a university student, I don't have the time to do this hobby and put videos together for YouTube, and also all of the other things that take up time in my life, and cook and eat. So I attempted to do this as a talk as I hobbied, and this is my second attempt, I guess, because I still like the idea of having a hobby channel out there so that I can communicate with people. I like conversations, and this is a way of broadening the pool of people in which I have those conversations about the hobby with. So what I'm currently about to open up is Gardus Steel Soul. Gardus Steel Soul. I've got a handful of stormcast from AOS when it came out in 2015. I've painted a handful of those. This is the last stormcast, I believe, that I have, or at least to my knowledge, who is unbuilt. So getting built, getting painted, kind of feels, I mean, not significant because I'm not emotionally connected to the Stormcast. They're obviously a newer faction. There's nothing in them that I have a history with, unlike Chaos Space Marines, for example. I always tell people the first White Dwarf I ever picked up was the release of the old plastic Core Berserker box, which has just been retired, which I do have a couple of those boxes left. There was a large article on World Eaters within that White Dwarf. An article on Carna Betrayer. Cypher also turned up in that magazine, as well as the first Metal Raptors. So Chaos had a hold on me from my first issue of White Dwarf, and it's never quite let go. When I first got into the hobby, I asked my grandparents to go and pick me up White Dwarf, which at that point I'd have been maybe 7 years old. I didn't quite understand all of the language around the hobby. I couldn't quite communicate exactly what it was that I was asking my grandparents for. And it's a long time ago. I may well have been asking for the magazine, or I might have just been asking for something associated with, or I might have been even be saying the White Dwarf store. I don't quite know. Can you go to the White Dwarf store for me, grandparents? Anyway, sent through the post was a box of Dwarf Warriors, which I always claim were multi-pose because you could stick the shield on. They came in two parts, and you could stick the shield on, and obviously, you could stick the shield on any way you wanted, the right way around or upside down. I still have one of those in one of my painted boxes. The rest are lost to history. I didn't have any paints, so I went across to a friend's house who had introduced me to the Games Workshop hobby, specifically, He was a Space Marine player, so all of his paints were themed to the more sci-fi options, and I painted him the blue coat and yellow boots as a result of his suggestions. And years later, I read Lord of the Rings and came across Tom Bombadil, and I'm not sure whether that counts as me coming up with the idea first or Tolkien, I'll be honest with you. Unlike a lot of people that I still talk to, however, I don't have a particular problem with the Stormcast Eternal. I think they seem to get some people excited about them. I think if you go back to the old world specifically, Warhammer the Old World, or Warhammer Old Editions, Fantasy Battle, it was more, it didn't have a core identity in the way that 40k has Space Marines as its core identity. You know, they are the heroes that you latch onto. I think Empire were probably closest to that, but if you got a starter box with Bretonnians versus Lizards, after you'd had a starter box that was High Elves versus Goblins, it didn't feel as if that was a shock. It didn't feel as if that came out of the blue or that it was something slightly odd. Whereas, you know, second edition Space Marines versus Orcs, third edition Space Marines versus Dark Elves, fourth edition Space Marines versus Orcs again, is it? And Space Marines versus Chaos Space Marines, Space Marines versus Space Marines versus Space Marines versus. In 40k, if you were to have a starter set that was Tau versus Mechanicum, it wouldn't feel like 40k anymore, because obviously, you know, they have very defined their hero, the box cover hero, and that obviously is what Stormcast is supposed to be. So I understand the rationale behind it. I understand that a lot of people enjoyed the new models. I kind of liked the ones from 2015, the first edition ones. I think all of their dragons are more interesting to me than the actual Stormcast themselves. I have talked to a friend about Age of Sigmar. I think because I've fallen out of love with gaming, like it is a thing I can do, but it's not something that I'm that bothered about not doing. Age of Sigmar, like there's no draw there for me, and so therefore I've no real desire to put anything together. I would pick up one or two models for it and paint them. A lot of them are still old world. You know, if you look at what they've been doing for the ogres, none of that, you know, the 4 models or whatever it is they've released for them could have been old world models. The lizardmen are still lizardmen. I think Cities of Sigmar obviously have just come out. They're a big push towards a new aesthetic. I think what they've been doing with the trees, Treekin, Sylvaneth, they feel more Age of Sigmar to me. But there's not, maybe perhaps the dwarves would be something that I would do, either or, the dwarf slayers or the dwarf sky pirates. But again, I'm not really that bothered about getting into the gaming, and that would be the only reason for putting together an entire dwarf faction, right, for the new game. Something that, were I to get lizards, I could play a game of AOS, or I could play a game of old world stuff, Me and my friend are doing some projects around 4th edition at the minute. Lizardmen, most of the Lizardmen range can be co-opted backwards for old world settings. There's no real room in that for a lot of, what would you could use Stormcast Eternal Spearmen as Empire Spearmen, but it would feel very different. Most of the orc stuff is still orcs. Most of death stuff, you part bits of it out. You still have spirits, you still have zombies. Most of that could still be used in an undead army. I think that's something I have thought about. Again, like I say, I don't mind taking little bits of models and putting them together. I think some of the models that are coming out are really cool, but I wouldn't particularly want to build an army around them because I would have no purpose for it. But if I was to go and use some of the stuff in 4th, 5th, 6th edition, it would make sense to me. For example, there's the big skull-faced Stormcast Eternal that has just come out, the guy on Dragon. He, with a little bit of work, looks very much like he could be a Chaos Lord, so he might be something I'd do something with. I am currently putting together some Chaos Trolls. They're currently on my workbench as well. But I think I'm not saying I'll never put together another Stormcast Eternal, I'll never pick up another Stormcast Eternal, but models that are just Stormcast Eternals with no other purpose to them, like Gardus. I don't even play 40k really, so because my friends won't go back to 3rd edition with me, so what's the point? There is no other purpose to Stormcast Eternals for me other than them being Stormcast Eternals, so and I've no idea, this probably will be then the last thing I pick up to put together just as a Stormcast Eternal. I have a few Space Marines as well. A few of the characters released over the last few years, and I could convert them all up as Chaos Space Marines and just stick them in random armies. But some of them are models that I'd kind of like to leave as is and just put them together for what they should be. So, for example, I have the recreation of the Imperial Space Marine still in my drawer, and I kind of just want to paint him up because he's a classic model in a classic pose. So I think once Gardus is done, that's going to be the next project, is just get all of the Space Marines that I have and own and just build them up and paint them. Not always in the same colour either, I should make that clear. None of the Stormcast I've painted up have been in a shared colour scheme. They've just been experimental models pushing my painting style. Sometimes I go and knock on a friend's door and say, give me 2 colours, and I will take that as the challenge. That's why I've got this boy at the minute on my painting desk, although it's too dark to paint today, so he's not getting any further. I went on, knocked on my friend's door think it was 10:30 a couple of nights ago, and said, 2 colours please. He had no idea what I was painting, so he doesn't know, he hasn't seen it. He said blue and pink, and so even though it's a coal model, he is blue and pink with, I'm trying to put some purple into it. I'm a big fan of the colour purple, so in the undercuts, in where there would be shadows, and all that purple coloration, and then the weird fleshy tentacle-y things I thought would be the good spot colour for pink. However, now that I've painted them pink, they make me slightly uncomfortable, as it feels a little bit tentacly. There are bad parts of the internet where you can see things that look a bit like that, and that was never my intention. But that is kind of how it's coming out, and it's probably only going to get worse the more paint, the more closer to being finished it is. Alright. Yeah. Anyway, I've been trying to remember the name of it. I don't want to go and Google it, that would be the easiest thing. I was trying to describe it to someone the other day, and you had the Dark Vengeance box set come out, and that had the dreadnought that wasn't a dreadnought, the Hellbrute, because obviously from about then Hellbrutes, the Maul of Fiends, Force Fiends, Helldrakes, things like that, they started to push the Chaos range further from just Imperials with spikes to something of their own. And then the AOS kit came out, and I remember seeing all the pictures of it before it came out and seeing that, and I assumed that it was a bit like how you had the big crab boy, the Defiler, to essentially the Unbound Defiler that came out as well. I assumed it was an equivalent, like this was an Unbound Hellbrute. It was something for demons, because obviously the Defiler thing can be taken in an old world demon army, but no, it's not, is it? It's like they call it Kurgrath Skull Takery something or other. Anyway, it's a fun idea. Such a big spawn-like ogre thing. Yeah, get him painted up at some point when the sun starts shining again, or at least it's not as overcast as today. I think I've still got that Hellbrute from Dark Vengeance somewhere. It might be at my parents'. I didn't have a saw at the time, so I used a Stanley knife to cut it apart, because it was a monopose singular boy, and so I fancied converting them up. It was about the time when GW was going back to monopose a lot more, and everyone was starting to complain that you couldn't convert stuff anymore, and so I decided to convert mine. Cut him into his random bits, arms off, legs off, and then he went into a box and has become lost. or currently temporarily misplaced. Maybe around somewhere, no doubt. But where that is, I haven't the foggiest. It's not here with me anyway. I should explain, because the last on live stream never got posted. I currently live at uni. I moved here from a cottage that I was living with an ex-partner in, and so a bunch of my stuff is here with me. I've moved around the last couple of years, and models and books, clothes, things like that are here with me. But there's also a significant chunk of my stuff, models and books, that is at my parents'. It got moved there. When I moved here, I had to be able to carry anything I brought with me, so that's why a bunch of stuff stayed there. I've got some big box games, things like Monolith games, Pantheon, Battles, the Greek board game that they released, and Claustrophobia, I think that's there as well, Batman, the board game. These big Kickstarter boxes with 100 and 200 models in them, they're all at my parents'. But some of the plastic kits I've brought over the last couple of years. So I believe I have another box specifically of Warhammer and Warhammer 40k, like one of these plastic tubs that you see at IKEA. I think that's in my parents' conservatory. So if I was to put some money on it, I would suggest that that is where my Hellbrute is. But again, I'm a student, so I don't actually have any money to put on it. And also it's been a couple of years since I moved all that stuff, so who knows if it is in that box. I do know that a bunch of stuff that I owned model wise did stay at the cottage, unfortunately. Very sad. I had some very old metal first, second edition, something like that, third edition Chaos Space Marines. No, probably second edition Chaos Space Marines, maybe earlier. And sadly they stayed behind. I just I forgot to pick them up when I moved. I don't think the Hellbrute falls into that category. I believe he did come away with me. I should probably find him. I have more pleasure painting slightly larger models than 28mm, mainly because there's less of them. Like, there's one of these guys, and yet on my table there's a unit of 20 models for our fourth edition projects that me and my friend are doing. And usually I can get maybe 4 to 6 models batch painted. I really hate the process, and so that's 20 models in front of me, painting them little bits at a time takes a while. Details are smaller. That's probably another thing. Yeah, the amount of them, the size of them, the details, I'm less of a fan. I've got to decide whether or not to do helmeted head or the unhelmeted head. I don't know. Should maybe ask my friend. I'm going to pause this here. There will be another on live stream when I come back to this guy. But I'm going to go and ask my friend whether or not he's helmeted or unhelmeted, because I'm not sure which I prefer. I think I prefer the unhelmeted, but helmeted are always more fun to paint, given my paint style at the minute. I don't know. I'm going to pause this or stop this if it's any good, the audio recording. You have just listened to this maybe. If the audio recording was rubbish, then I've just spent half an hour talking to myself. See you in the next one.